watching the Forefront Church video podcast. And wherever you're at viewing online, we just want to say thank you and welcome. And one of the ways that we can help connect with you is we want to hear from you and where you're at and how we can help. And so head over to forefrontchurch.info after the message and click the Connect tab. It's a great way for us to help you along your spiritual journey as you connect with God and learn about Jesus. And so sit back, relax. We hope that you're challenged and encouraged from today's message. Have you ever been misunderstood or maybe misrepresented? Have you ever had someone think they know you only to meet you and say, "Oh, you're nothing like I thought you were"? We've all at different times been labeled. We've all had things assumed about us that, well, aren't true. And the truth is, we do this with God too. Millions of people throughout time have gone through life thinking they know about God, the Bible, and the divine. But do we know who He truly is? And do we know what He's really like?
We are kicking off a brand new series today, 4 things I wish that you knew about God. I'm excited about this series, but it's also very personal because there were some things that I absolutely believed were true about God, Christians, the divine, and faith, that as I explored and dug deep, the layers as they pulled back, I realized, wow, I had a lot of misconceptions. Because, well, Christians were really mean that I knew, and leaders at churches were falling to all sorts of things. And so as I looked out growing up in my formative years, I was like, man, Christians are kind of jerks. Well, the church is just kind of judgmental and mean, and why would I ever want to be a part of something like that? And we're going to spend the next 4 weeks diving into the Bible as God has literally from wall to wall given us what it means to follow what is true instead of following our feelings. And yes, there are literal Bible pages all across the backdrop. No one is getting struck by lightning for doing it. There was a little girl as they were watching doing that. She said, that is very disrespectful. And so we're going to help undo some of those lies as well. And it doesn't start when we get older, right? We don't start believing lies as adults. This starts even when we're younger. And parents, this is all your fault. It's true. If you're a parent, you have done this. And I started digging down and doing some research on lies that parents tell their kids. And if you dig down into the internet, you can find some things where you're like, I cannot believe I'm going to talk to you guys about a few of them. Open your eyes to some things, parents, that you have done in one way, shape, or form. One girl wrote in that her mom shared with her that if you lie, a red dot would show up on your head. And her mom always knew when she was lying because she'd walk and cover up her forehead when her mom was talking to her. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to use that. Another parent shared with their kids, I can relate to this one, they don't sell replacement batteries for that toy. Yeah. And if you're the person that buys someone else's kid a toy that makes noise, there's a special place for you when you die. A dad told his daughter that roadkill, those animals, they're just taking a nap. Just taking a little siesta forever. Another father told his son that the rumble strip on the side of the road is for blind drivers. For some of you, it's still registering. He figured this out when he went to driver's ed and raised his hand about the rumble strips, and the class laughed at him. Thanks, Dad. Another father told his daughter, if you leave the turn signal on too long, your car will flip over. Anxiety and tons of counseling later. She's healed from that. Another girl went to college, and when her roommate turned the TV on, she was flabbergasted because in her little small town, living out on a farm, her dad told her the TV only worked when it rained. Took till college to figure that out. Can't make this stuff up. Another mom, I don't know if this is okay, Every time you touch something, told her kids this, every time you touch something in the store, a kitten dies. That's funny. Little girl then begins to explain how her sibling touched something and the whole store found out about this lie as everyone broke down because a kitten had died. Mom told her kids as they were driving through a drive-thru and they were acting a fool, if you keep complaining and acting like that, when we get to the window, they're going to give you a sad meal, not a happy one. They never misbehaved. That's good. Another mom told her son that living in California, that earthquakes happen when two planets are fighting one another. So when he got into 6th grade and raised his hand in science class to let everybody know, he was laughed at. Super thanks, Mom, explaining that, but that's wicked awesome. Hey, why is this happening? Planets are battling. That sounds much better than, well, the tectonic plates. And two parents in the suburbs told their kids that dandelions are illegal and we'll get fined if you don't clean up the yard. So everyone's just out there picking dandelions. My mom, she's a liar. Doesn't matter. She goes to Forefront here. She was in first service. She was really pumped. I told this story. If you've been around Forefront for any length of time, you may have heard this. My mom explained to us that she was an alien. Now, at first, if you hear this, just you're like, huh, how does that make sense? Well, my mom was born in Roswell, New Mexico. If you have any idea about Roswell, New Mexico, that's where the aliens supposedly landed. Now, that might now, at first glance, you might think that's not that big of a deal. Well, she was born around the year that they landed. At least so we've heard. And to make matters worse, from that area, we had all these like sand paintings from the Southwest, and so they had these things, and some of them looked like aliens on our walls, but it gets better. Because my mom's name is Neila, N-E-I-L-A. Flip that around. Yeah, alien. She was born in Roswell, New Mexico, the year the aliens supposedly landed, with sand paintings of aliens. And her name backwards is Alien. Remember telling that to my friend, my dad's a cop, my dad's this, my mom's an alien. What? Teacher corrected that lie pretty quick. Thanks, Mom. You'll have to answer for that. Sorry, Jesus. You know, we believe all kinds of lies, you know, and while it may start even growing up, as we get older, things shift and things change, and especially when it comes to faith. When it comes to the church, when it comes to God and interaction and our purpose in this world, we believe a lot of lies. And I know I did. You know, as we mentioned in the opening, there were people within the church growing up that, well, honestly, I would hear what they would say on Sunday mornings as they would get up and talk about something like praying or offering or communion, and then I would know that they would yell at their kids later, and they were hurtful to their families. I didn't want to buy into any of that. And I believed a lot of lies. And in talking with so many of you, as you've walked through these doors to seek refuge and healing, you say, you know, I believed a lot of things about God that I'm learning are not true. And one of the biggest lies that we can believe, and as we unpack 4 things over the next 4 weeks that I wish that you knew about God, one of the biggest lies that we begin to believe is that God isn't for me. That God isn't about your life. He's not in your corner. That He is rooting against you. That He is this celestial curmudgeon with a long graying beard that is just waiting for the moment that you'll mess up. Just throw down a lightning bolt to mess up your carburetor if you think that way. Got a flat tire. I must have done something wrong. God's mad at me. Bank account's at zero. God's mad at me. No, you just don't know how to manage finances. You know, we think these things, that God is out to get us, that God isn't for us. And I get it. I understand this. And I'm reminded of it every time we gather and we pull in, because right next to us, even though we live in the biggest city in the state of Virginia, I see it every time. In a city, we're right next to sheep. I mean, you guys walk over there. Some of you guys, you walk over there with your kids. That's why we had to put up the signs, because your little mongrels were feeding them Skittles and Cheetos, all kinds of other stuff. Like, that wasn't my kid. Yes, it was. I'm reminded when we see these sheep, you know, it's interesting, sheep, because, I mean, while they're from, my daughters call them clouds with legs. That's what they first saw. They're like clouds, they're like puffy clouds with legs. It's not awe. They're awful. These sheep, as I walk by and I see them, I look at it because our offices are right out these doors, so I'll watch them as they're doing their thing, and I'll get, the squirrel falls asleep every once in a while, hamster falls asleep at the wheel, so I'm like, and I get distracted, so I'll just watch them. It's pretty cool. But one day, as we're looking at these guys, the guy that was out there was getting ready to shear them, and so I wanted to know what was going on, because, and before I kind of get to that point, because it's a pretty interesting thing the way that he was doing it, I feel like every time I look by there, if you ever seen it, and kind of well, that I'm the black sheep. When it comes to faith, when it comes to even church as it happens, we've in a lot of ways been blacklisted as a church at stuff. It's always interesting to walk into pastors' gatherings and everyone has their polo shirts and khakis, and then we walk in and they're like, "What's wrong with that guy? This isn't the AA meeting. This is the pastor's meeting." I'm like, "Hey guys, how's it going?" Even in Christian faith, I've felt like the black sheep, but even in my own personal faith, I've felt like the black sheep, like that I can never do enough. And the church has been really bad at this at large, of making people feel like you have to do the right thing, say the certain thing, wear the certain stuff, say all the right weird Christian words. Christians say some weird words, stuff that's just like, what? And so I felt like somehow I didn't fit in or belong. And as we dived down deep, and I was talking with the guys, he was getting ready to shear them, and he said, actually, I was like, man, the sheep look so nice. They're all fluffy and white, and they're cute. He's like, oh, they're gross underneath. I was like, all of them? He's like, oh yeah, every single one. And he's cutting, doing his thing, and sure enough, he's like, they're greasy, they're grimy, they're all darker underneath. It's not this puffy, nice thing. He's like, when you dig down and you do it away, there's a stark difference between the outside fluffy, happy clouds with legs, and the underneath, it's just matted, it's yucky, there's bugs, and they don't look anything like the outside that you think. He's like, actually, all sheep underneath are pretty gross. And the guy looks a little weird, huh? Up front, they were like, he's like, help me. At the end of the day, I think it's interesting that God likens human beings to sheep. Sheep are dumb. So you could take that up with God when you get to heaven. Why'd you liken us to them? But it's interesting because sheep also know the voice of the one who cares for them. And, as he was talking about some of the things going on and shearing the sheep and all that stuff, I couldn't help but think, man, there are often times where I feel like I'm an outsider, but the reality is we're all outsiders because none of us deserve God's grace, God's love, God's mercy. And I took this up a big deal with the youth pastor at my church during that time growing up, because he was looking at me, and he was an older guy, and I want to tell you, man, if you're older, you and Brandon talked about it, we talked about it in the weeks before it, you have value and worth here in this community. Because, man, there's all kinds of youth pastors during that time, but this guy was older. He was in his mid to late 50s leading students, and he was just pouring into my life and challenging me and investing in me. And he knew, like, I was sitting in youth group just angry, normal teenager, and just angry. And he's like, hey man, like, what's your deal? And I was like, what? And he's like, what's wrong? I was like, well, this is all just kind of dumb. And he's like, what I said was dumb? I was like, well, kinda. Like, and I was a teenager, so I didn't care if an older person was mad at me at all. I was, forget authority, and all this stuff. And he's like, well, you're just kind of glazed over. I was like, yeah. I was like, my best friend, his dad got up there, at service this morning, and he was like praying all these proper things and doing all this stuff. I was like, but I know he's awful to his kids. I watching these people do this, I said, why would I want to follow this? Because so many people said that they were new, and yet, inside's all great, but on the outside they looked awful. Why would I do that? And I was believing the lie that God isn't for anybody because everybody's pretty much awful. And so I was like, why would I want to follow that? Because they haven't changed. There's nothing great about their life. He said, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home and I want you to read this book. It's in the New Testament. It's Romans chapter 8. And we're going to get there in a second. But if you have a Bible, I want you to turn over, because we're going to unpack this a little bit, to a very obscure book that we're going to get to later, Zephaniah. And so if you're like, Zephaniah, it's in the Old Testament of the Bible. I have never in 20 years preached straight from that passage. We're going to do it today. And it's been fascinating to look at in this lie that we believe that God isn't for us. And so if you have a Bible, turn over there. If you don't have a Bible, we give them away for free. You could stop by the Get Connected table in the lobby, or you can go to our digital Get Connected table, download, just click the Bible tab, download a Bible app, turn over to Zephaniah chapter 3. It's in the Old Testament of the Bible. We're going to get there in a little while, but this youth pastor said, hey, Jason, I want you to go home and read this passage. And so I started reading, and before we get to the last verse of this passage in Romans 8, I believed all kinds of lies that God wasn't for me, that I'm not good enough, that God isn't in my corner. And I started unpacking some of the stuff. The very out of the gate, the first verse says, there's no condemnation over in that Romans 8 passage. There's no condemnation for those who are in Jesus. I was like, wait a second. Like, do my parents know this? Because all I had heard that, God isn't for me, that God wants me to not watch rated R movies, that God doesn't even want me to look at my girlfriend, much less, hold her hand or anything else. God wants me to burn, all my records. This was happening in youth group. They were like, bring your cassette tapes. For those of you guys under the age of 30, you know how to use Google, so you can figure that out. All the rest of us know a cassette tape and a pencil is magical. And so, you bring your cassette tapes, you bring all your stuff, and you were bringing it there, and you were going to just throw it in this trash can. And we're going to be like, yeah, we're just going to love Jesus. I was like, this is awful. I felt that I was never good enough, all this stuff, and all the kids, all in this generation, the same thing. And so I'm opening up this passage, I'm like, there's no condemnation. It starts going, you're set free, you have a new spirit. There's other people that are going to want to go down that road, but they just want to follow selfishness. You could be different. And I was like, what? He said, you have been set apart, but not you. It says you're obligated based on the fact that God loves you. God is for you. You don't have to live in that any longer. And it wraps up in verse 31. It says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? And I just remember all those connected moments of thinking I was right, that Christians were awful, that God wasn't for me. It's almost like those were ingrained memories that had to be yanked out and reprogrammed and thrown and Control-Alt-Delete all the stuff so that God could teach me a new way of what it meant to follow him, that God was actually for me. Let me put it in another way in case you don't quite get it, that God is without a doubt, hands down, unequivocally, irrefutably for you. That it may feel like you are messed up on the outside, that it may feel like you are of no worth, that you are a black sheep, that you are a wounded vessel, that your life is just messed up and there's no way that God can use you. And I'm here to tell you that couldn't be further from the truth. Maybe we need to put it more simply. God is for you, and the cross has the final word in that. That God, through Jesus, pays a price so that you and I can be free. And listen, most days I wake up, I feel like that black sheep. I feel like a messed up vessel. I'm like, God, you can't use me. Like, my life is a train wreck. I mess up as a dad. I mess up as a husband. Just ask my wife. I mess up as a friend. I'm an awful friend. I forget to text message. I don't email friends. I don't call friends because I'm super introverted. I'm like, I thought about calling you like 4 weeks ago. Like, I'm just all this stuff, and I fail. And I go, God, you could not use that because I'm messed up. I want you to know that no matter how broken, hurt, and wounded you feel, God is for you. And it's not about your behavior. For far too long, it was a star chart mentality. Went to church, check. Went to small group, check. I prayed today, check. In all of these things, and if I get enough stars, I get God's love. God's love is not contingent upon your actions. God's love is contingent upon who he is and whose you are. You're his. His love is for you, and he is in your corner. But here's the problem with all of this. This vessel that we have, this black sheep, this messed up body that we walk around in, we don't feel it. We feel like the outside doesn't match the inside. How many times have we based something that should be based in fact, but is based more in our feelings? Well, I know that says that, but I don't really feel that way. We act like, like 14, 15-year-olds. Like you tell them the sky is blue, they're like, purple. And you're like, no, but the sky is really blue. They're like, green. And whenever you're like, no, serious, and just straight stubborn, and you go, well, I don't really feel like it's like that way. And I know, I was the same way. My dad told me all kinds of stuff. I'm like, psh, you don't even know. He knew. He knew. The adults around me knew. My youth pastor knew. My parents knew. I was just dumb because I felt like my feeling trumped what was true. And feeling leaves us in an awful place. And there's this you've been holding over in Zephaniah. And this is an age-old story, or as Beauty and the Beast would say, a tale as old as time. From the very inception of God's creation, this happens again, and again. God says, I love you. Humanity, I love you. And we go, cool, we're going to do our own thing. Okay, bye, thanks. TTYL, peace. And we leave, right? Let's talk to you later in case you didn't understand yearbook lingo. You say, I'm not going to bother with that. And God would keep sending individuals to speak into the lives of humanity to say, and these were prophets that would come through and say, I'm bringing God's love and truth. You are loved. And they go, cool. And then they go, hey, you're messing up. There's things in your life that are not moving in the way God designed you. God is not pleased in the fact that you turn away from him. He loves you. That has not changed. But your behavior is saying, I don't want to follow God. I want you to know that there could be consequences to that. In this last prophet that comes through, his name is Zephaniah. Don't name your kid that. He'll get joked forever. Zephaniah comes in, and it's a new prophet, new guy, same story. And he begins to tell them, God loves you. God is for you. God is about you and your existence and your value and your worth. And I want to read to you just before we get into those moments, a couple of things that were happening to them during the time. It says that during that time there were leaders that were unprincipled. They were treacherous people. There were ministers profaning the sanctuary and were just about violence. The Lord was within the city walls, and he was righteous and did no wrong. Morning to morning he would dispense justice and love. In every new day he didn't fail, yet the unrighteous did what they wanted to do and knew no shame. He thought, surely you will come fear me and accept my correction, but they were still eager to act corruptly in all they did. They're like, God, we hear you, we just don't care. This is, you only live once. We're going to do what we want to do. That's great, Zephaniah. You do you, we'll do us. The problem is Zephaniah's going, that's not going to work. God is for you, but God wants something better for you. They're like, no, we'll do our own thing. We don't feel it. And what ends up happening in that process is instead of believing facts, we put this fear that begins to mount. We go, this God is awful. This God is abusive. His people are abusive. And so we put fear before facts. And he kept sharing with them and kept sharing with them. Here's what can happen. But he wraps it up. He's saying there are people there that love God, that they know that God is for them. And this is what he wraps up with in verse 17. It says, the Lord your God, and I don't want you to miss this, the Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you. And I love this last part, but will rejoice over you with singing. I've read this passage before. I've read the Bible quite a few times, cover to cover, and this just jumped out at me as we were preparing for this series. That God, the God of all creation, takes delight over me. I know that's hard to believe. And even more so, he takes delight over thinking of you. And then it keeps going down. It says, but he will rejoice with you ever singing. God is up there with his celestial iPhone, just being like, Jason's awesome, doing the Carlton. Like he is pumped. He has a track about me. He has a song about you. Like it said, that's what it said. He is rejoicing over you with singing. He is up there Beyonceing it all day long over you. That you are good, or Metallica, whatever works for you, you know. He's up there rock, whatever the case may be. He has a song that he has placed over your life because you are valued, loved, cherished, and you have worth. God is for you. And when I start thinking about that, I go, man, my life, your life has that much meaning that God is for me. But we still keep getting back to, but God, the outside doesn't feel like it matches the inside. God, I know that you said you did something in my life. And here's the saddest part, that I meet a lot of people who claim faith. God loves me, God all this stuff, that over time, they don't believe God is for them, because I'll meet people out around town, and I'll see them, and they will avoid me like I have an infectious disease. Like they haven't been in church for a while, and I could see them from like across the street, like, oh snap, there's the pastor. And they will move, they will do everything. They turn into Carl Lewis, they're running, they're jumping over stuff. I mean, they're an Olympic athlete trying to avoid me. And I don't like sit up here when I get up and preach, and I don't like look around the room, because all you guys pick the same seats every service you go to. I don't look around and be like, oh, they're not here, whatever the case may be. But I'll see them like, hey, how's it going? And the first thing they do, this is why I know that believers have a tendency to get into a mentality that God isn't for them, that God is about their performance and not just simply loving them. Because when I see them and they finally, and I know they saw me already, but they'll play it up and be like, oh, hi. I'm like, don't play. If you see, just don't run. I saw you. Then you look foolish, and then you got to do a whole dramatic thing. And this is not Days of Our Lives. Just come on over. Let's talk. And they come over and they'll be like, hey, so, I haven't been in church in a while. I'm really sorry. One, I don't know if that's entirely true. It just feels like something you should say. But two, I always think like, man, you don't need to apologize to me. I'm not like keeping track and doing whatever. But what I do think is, wow, you believe that God, that he's tick marking whether or not you're here or not here. This is transformed from a heart thing to a performance thing. That God is looking at every little instance of your life going like, I can't believe you did that mess again. God's love is not contingent upon your checklist. Now, I would say that as you begin to fall in love with God and be transformed with God, and God is in your corner, that you go, man, I want to be a part of this. I want to celebrate. I want to bring my family. I want to bring my friends. I want to bring all the people that I know, because this is such a big deal, because God is in my corner. God, you are Rocky, and God is Mickey, and he is helping you up. He's saying, listen, I am for you. I'm about you. Don't you fall down. I'm going to help you up. But don't you for a second feel like or believe the lie that God is not for you, because God is without a doubt, hands down, unequivocally, irrefutably for you. And even if you feel like that outer shell is messed up, that you're the black sheep, your family's told you, you go to church, but you go to Forefront. I've actually had people say that my mom and dad came and they thought but they're like, that place is weird. Yes, we are. We're super weird. You may feel like you're wounded, that infidelity in your life makes you feel like you can't, whatever's inside, that God can't overcome it. The arguments with your kids, the unforgiveness that you are hanging on to right now in this moment as I am speaking, you know who it is. That you feel like that God cannot overcome that you are wounded, you are battered, you are bruised, and that God can't ever, no matter what he puts in, it will always come out bad, because God isn't in your corner. And I want to let you know that no matter how messed up, no matter how much of a black sheep you may be, God is true to his promise. And even if your life is a total train wreck, and here's the real reality if you don't think it is, and we say this jokingly, but it's accurate. All of us have a messed up life, and so if you don't feel like your life has failures in it, you're a liar and a failure. Like, let's just jump on board. All right, we are all this. And God uses this and still does this despite the fact that we're messed up. That is beautiful news, and something that we have to, very foundationally go, God, I need to know this about you. that you love me, that you can use me, that my life has value, and that even black sheep and messed up vessels, God is for you. And Jesus on the cross has the final word. You have been set free. The question is, what will you do with that truth? Because at the end of the day, that feels good, but what action does that lead to? How does that translate into your marriage? Because if God is for you and for your relationship, what are you going to do with that? How does that interact with your relationship with your parents, with your neighbor, with your coworkers? If God is for you, how will you translate that love to others? With your kids, those of you guys with kids, how does that grace and God being for you translate to them? Nobody can push that belief on you. The choice is yours. Will you take that truth for what it is, or will you run in the other direction like many have before? My prayer is that you'll choose God and His truth. Would you pray with me?
Thanks for tuning in to the Forefront Church video podcast. Our hope and prayer is that this has left you encouraged and challenged you in your faith. And you might have some questions and some ways that you want to figure this out, and we want to help with that. Head over to forefrontchurch.info, and there's a couple different ways that you can connect. Click the Connect tab and let us know how we can be praying for you, or a staff member can be contacting you this week. Maybe you have just been encouraged by this and want to support the ministry here at Forefront Church. You can click the Giving tab, as well as other tabs that are in there to help you along in your journey with God. And so we're thankful for you. Thanks for tuning in, and we cannot wait to see you again here online on the video podcast. We love you, and we'll see you then.